So UFC 327 has just wrapped up. I went a total of 6-4, I believe it was, on the fights that I actually predicted. Two of them I didn't, which were the Radtke fight and the Chris Padilla fight. Now, I picked Radtke to win, but I'm not going to include that in my actual picks because I didn't break it down and I didn't really mention it. And the Chris Padilla fight, I didn't really predict because I just hadn't seen enough, like as far as fight tape and stuff like that. And yeah, I call it fight tape. I'm a hardcore. But I went 6-4. This was a pretty difficult card to predict. I think a lot of people were kind of everywhere with this card, but I got some really interesting fights and actually uploaded it to my channel, I believe a day or day and a half ago, and you can see there my picks. And first and foremost, I got Lupi Godinez and Kelvin Gastelum, who you can see at the top left corner. I got those wrong. Lupi Godinez, I'm not gonna even talk about it. It's Suarez just finished her. Congrats. I thought having Patrick Mix be your main training partner would have been a detriment against Suarez, but I guess it wasn't. And for Kelvin Gastelum, the Dark Knight rises, man. Vicente Luque still got it, I guess. So yeah, but now we move on to Gamrot versus Rubovic, and I picked Gamrot. So the reason why I had picked Gamrot, I had mentioned this, was Esteban Rubovic. He's got great boxing. He's even got pretty good takedown defense. But if you watch his fight against the Tajikistan fighter, who again, every time I start recording, I completely forget his name. I believe his name was Loic. I believe he's from Tajikistan. I'm all over the place today. I'm still riding that high from the Hokit fight, which I'm gonna mention later. But Gamrot won by second round submission, and now I didn't actually have Gamrot submitting him. I actually had it like a decision, and actually halfway through the first round, I was thinking to myself that this is a guy who's beaten Arman. I think he should have beaten Dan Hooker. Now the Arman fight could have gone to Arman. Let's be honest here, but I was thinking if this man just had a little bit more finishing potential, if he could give you something to fear, then I think he would be champion. And as I was thinking that, in the second round he did get the submission, which is very impressive against a guy like Esteban. And again, I wish the UFC would stop doing this with Gamrot. This is the second unranked opponent he's gotten. He has a win over Arman, who's the number one ranked guy. Give him somebody higher. And again, Esteban, when he fought Lowen, I kind of went on a tangent there. What happened in that fight was he got taken down repeatedly, and the difference is that Lowen Loic. I keep calling him Lowen. He has much heavier hands than Gamrot does, that's for sure. But I was thinking, man, Gamrot, he might not hit as hard as he does, but he's a better technical wrestler, and he's crafty in his own way, man. His striking is not bad. It's kind of underrated in a weird way. So I had Gamrot winning this by a crafty decision, but he ended up getting the submission, and I hope this is something that he's going to continue to improve on. If he can continue to be a finisher, then he's a scary guy at this division. It feels like if you put him against a grappler like Arman or Dariush, it seems like he's not able to meet that level. But you put him up against a striker, and even a dangerous one at that, and he's got their number. And again, I think Hooker, people will say, well, Dan Hooker lost to Arman and lost to BSD. Gamrot losing a split decision isn't that impressive in hindsight. But that was kind of like the last prime Dan Hooker we had, because I believe after that fight it was that he went on a year hiatus or something for injuries and stuff. But either way, Gamrot gets it done. I got my pick right. And I'm a Gamrot fan, so this is nice to see. The next fight, Kevin Holland versus Randy Brown. I picked Kevin Holland, and Kevin Holland won. This was maybe a bit of a difficult fight for people to kind of predict because they're very similar, right? Two long, rangy guys who will utilize the leg kicks, power. Deep. You can argue Randy Brown's got more power than Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland, I think, is better overall in terms of, for example, getting the fight. When the fight goes to the ground in his jiu-jitsu, he's got some nasty chokes. And at one point, I actually thought he had Randy Brown out, but Randy was able to escape it. Kevin had his Randy Brown's leg chewed up in the first round. You saw all these welts building from all those leg kicks. And I kind of had Holland winning just by him being better. And I think I even mentioned the chokes will be there, and the fight goes to the ground even accidentally by a trip or anything, Holland can snatch something up, and he did. But he won the fight by decision. And yeah, I like Kevin Holland. I'm glad to see this man. And I kind of hope he just stays at welterweight, doesn't do this whole going up and down. I think Randy Brown's a good fighter. So this is a good win for him. And he could, now that D-Rod's finally back in the UFC, they could run that back if need be. So yeah, Kevin Holland gets the win. I get my pick right. The second, or technically I'm like 2-2 now because I got the Gastelum and Godinez fight wrong. Next fight is Aaron Pico versus Patricio Pitbull, and I picked Aaron Pico. Now, Aaron Pico was like a crazy favorite for this fight, and even though I picked him, I was thinking that when you're a guy who's been finished as often as Pico has, which has been, I believe, 4 or 5 times, which might not seem a lot in the grand scheme of things, but he goes out pretty badly, right? But I picked Pico for 2 reasons. Number one, Aaron Pico has never been to a decision loss, as in he's only ever been finished in his losses. And Patricio Pitbull, post-2020, has not been a prolific finisher. Like, you can argue he's kind of past his prime. He's been fighting much more crafty lately, and I felt like if you're going to try to take Pico to a decision, a guy who's as explosive and as forward-coming as he is, that's not a good idea. And I turned out to be right. Pitbull had a lot of success in the first round. He was catching him. He stung up Pico. Pico's nose was like all red and stuff. But then in the second and third, dude, Pico just brought it on him, and he dropped Pitbull. And it seemed like, first and foremost, Pitbull's boxing is just, or not Pitbull, excuse me, Pico's boxing is awesome. Pitbull's got some excellent takedown defense, so that was great to see. But Pico in general was just the difference when they would hit each other's, right? Like, even though Pitbull's seen as the more durable fighter and Pico as the guy who's really easy to hurt, Pico was just stunning him over and over again with his shots, and his boxing's real crispy, and he is there to be hit. At this point, I don't think it's a chin thing. I think it's just that when Pico, it takes him, a bit to build into a fight. He's very explosive, but once he gets his rhythm going, he can win. And I like this pace for him in this fight. He wasn't crazy bulldozing after him, but it was but he was, going after him. Pretty fast-paced fight in general. It did slow down a bit towards the end. He kind of used the third round to keep Pitbull up against the cage and kind of just knee at him and keep him there. And yeah, I just didn't think Pitbull at this point in his career, if you're gonna beat Pico, you have to finish him. That's kind of my opinion. You're not gonna take him to decision. He's too explosive and powerful. He's gonna be, as the fight goes on, he's gonna find his range. He's gonna find his shots, and I just don't think Pitbull had it in him to finish him. So I picked Pico, and I got it right. So yeah, move on now to the main card. I picked Cub Swanson, and Cub Swanson got the win. I mentioned this before, but fighters who typically retire on their own terms almost always go out nice, like Robbie Lawler, Cub Swanson, Michael Chiesa. When you choose to retire, you go out not with this sort of like feeling that you're being forced out of the fight game. You're leaving with the sense of, I could keep doing this, but I don't want to. And Cub Swanson, by the way, even though I'm a big fan of his, I actually had completely forgotten he's 42 years old. Like, I must have been asleep when they were introducing him previously. But he's an older guy, and he looked fantastic out there. I picked Cub Swanson because, as I mentioned, he's a complete veteran of the game. He knocked out Charles Oliveira, beat Dustin Poirier. There's nothing Nate does that I don't think Cub Swanson hasn't seen before. You know what I mean? Like, he's been through it all. He's seen it, and as tough and as insane as Nate can be, there's nothing there that I thought, that could be a big issue for Cub. And Cub dealt with him in the first round pretty quickly and pretty easily. Again, I'm a big fan of Cub. The fight with Du Choi, you can talk about Cub for hours, man. Like the WEC UFC legend he is. I actually got kind of teary-eyed, kind of like how Joe Rogan did when they were showing the highlights of it. So I'm a big fan of Cub. I mentioned before that KO win he got at the Covington Buckley card is one of the most hyped I've ever been for a KO. Like, I was going insane. So yeah. Sucks to see Nate lose like that because he is such a fun guy with a fun personality and a fun fighter. But it's nice to see Cub Swanson go out, with a big win. And at the age of 42, he's got nothing else to prove. So now we move on to Dominic Reyes versus Johnny Walker. I got this fight wrong. I picked Johnny Walker. Dominic Reyes won, I believe, a split decision. So I'm seeing some people call it a robbery. Honestly, I thought it could be 2-1 either way. This was a very dull, very boring fight. My thoughts on this fight going into this, I think I had it at 29-28 as well. I can't remember my official prediction. I might have been like somewhere between it's a KO versus a decision, but when you have, it's not like these two they get KOs, but they're not like KO artists. You know what I mean? They're not Ilya Tapira level of every time this guy fights, it's like he's knocking somebody out. These guys get finishes, but they also get finished pretty badly. So I think it was a matter of which one of them gets finished first. And I think when both of these guys knew that, both of them knew that this guy could turn my lights off with one punch. They both fought very defensively. Neither guy really wanted to go first. And I picked Johnny Walker because I just thought that the leg kicks and the grappling, even though Dominic Reyes has fantastic grappling defense, I just thought, at any point if Johnny Walker gets dropped, he could at least shoot a takedown, whereas I felt like Dominic Reyes wouldn't. But 2-1 either way, sure, Johnny Walker could have gotten this, but Reyes did. Reyes did look a bit better than he did in the Olberg fight. In the Olberg fight, his physique in general looked a bit soggy, whereas over here he in general looked a bit better. So Dominic Reyes gets the win. Could have gone either way. Not much more to say about that. We move on now to possibly the greatest fight of all time. I would argue the greatest brawl of all time, if not fight. If you value technique, this was not the greatest fight of all time. If you value just excitement, this was the greatest fight of all time. I picked Hokit, and I'm going to call him Hokit because that's kind of what the commentary calls him. I know some people say Hokit, but I'm just going to call him Hokit, okay? So I picked him to beat Curtis Blades, and I got this one right. Now, why would I pick a relatively unproved guy against a veteran of the sport? And I picked Hokit because when I was watching his fights, first of all, he's a small heavyweight. He's only 6'1". He's 230 in a division where you can go up to 265. So he's like 30 pounds less than the heaviest you can be at this division. But one thing I saw from him, like in his LFA fights, his Bellator, or UFC, he's so light on his feet. And I called him kind of like a Colby Covington of the heavyweight division, where he's constantly pressuring you, shooting takedowns. Even if you get back up, he's just swarming you. He's shooting another takedown, he's got you down. That's kind of... I felt that what would happen in this fight was he would do that for about 2 rounds. Excuse me. He would do that for maybe 2 rounds, and then in the 3rd round, he would start to slow down a bit, and then Curtis Blades would kind of pick back up, and I had Hokit winning kind of like a close 29-28. I believe that was like my official prediction. Now, I was kind of close. Like, it was a 29-28. It was a very close fight. There were a lot of clinching, not as much wrestling in general, because Hokit, I don't even know if he attempted a single takedown, whereas Curtis Blades did. They were in the clinch quite a bit, and I actually mentioned that as well. There would be a lot of work in the clinch. For me, it would be Hokit would be trying to tire out Blades in there, right? But and the reason why I had Hokit actually getting tired in the 3rd would be, when you're trying to push around a guy who's a lot heavier than you, that takes a toll on you as well. So I was like, he would hold him up against their knees, punches, break it, swarm him some more, shoot a takedown. Ended up being much more of a full-blown brawl than I was expecting, and he hurt Blades several times in this fight. And what's probably the most impressive thing to me about this is that Hokit had very little physical damage on him, like actual damage you could see, whereas Curtis Blades was like almost unrecognizable by the end of it. So I kind of got this fight really well, but at the same time not really. Close 29-28, clinch work. Hokit coming forward, being light on his feet, that helped him a lot with rolling with the punches that Blades was throwing. Look, I think, and I mentioned this as well, if Curtis Blades, he's like, when I call him the king of blobs, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like, but below him you got Sergey Spivak, you got all the other blobs. I think Curtis Blades better than all of them, right? He's got a bit of a belly. He's not very light on his feet. He's got good hands, but I mean, it's not heavy hands by any means. He's knocked out Dawkins, okay. But he's below the Sergey Pavloviches, the Tom Aspinalls, the Cyril Gons. Like, he's below these guys. And I felt that Hokit would beat any of the blobs, but I think he would have trouble against some of those higher level guys. Maybe he could beat Pavlovich, who knows, because Pavlovich got taken down and just ground and pounded by Overeem, so you never know if Hokit does the same thing. But I just felt like Hokit's style is really good against these more blobbier guys. And again, Curtis Blades probably being the best blob of them all. But I had Hokit winning because when you're that light and you're that quick, I just thought at heavyweight, I think he'd have a lot of success. And he can wrestle, which is always really nice to see. 29-28, close decision. I had Hokit by based on damage, and that's what happened. So now we move on to the co-main event. Another fight that I got right was Costa and Morzakanov. And I picked Costa. Costa won. And as I mentioned before, if you've seen some of my previous videos, I was kind of harsh on Costa because he lost to Vettori. And I don't think Vittori's any good. I'm very open about this. I think Vittori's probably one of the worst title contenders of all time. But I've learned to kind of just ignore that loss. You know, every fighter, Khabib, you name him, Makhachev, he's been KO'd by some guy. Fighters have just those fights where it's like you don't really get how they look like that. Costa, I think, I put him in the C tier before, but I think I feel comfortable putting him on the B tier now. I think he's actually a pretty good fighter. Now, I picked him to beat Azamat simply because I mentioned I think Costa loses to a lot of guys in like maybe the top 10 of light heavyweight. But when it comes to Azamat, just stylistically, if you look at, I mentioned this in my prediction video, look at this man's waist. Like, look at Azamat's waist. I'm not talking about belly fat or anything. Look how wide he is. He is open all day for body kicks. And Costa slams body kicks. Even if you go to defend him, he's gonna kick your arms, throw in head kicks, leg kicks. I mentioned that Costa's path to victory here is kicks, and he did just that. Wobbled him with the head kick. He went down. Ref stepped in. Did basically what he needed to do. At some point, I think Azamat even clipped him, and Costa was a bit hurt. But Costa's just so durable. This is what I said about him compared to a Alexander Rakic who can't really take damage like that. Costa can, and I was very confident that he would, and he did. Excuse me. And again, I don't necessarily rate. I never rated Costa that highly. You know, he lost to Strickland, and Strickland's a very tricky matchup. Lost to Whitaker. Had a weirdly close, not really, but you know, a not very impressive fight against Luke Rockhold, which was very entertaining, but got dog walked by Adesanya. But then he has those performances where he demolishes Roman Kopylov. He goes to war with Yoel Romero, and he just murked Morzakanov. So I think Paulo Costa, I'm going to go and throw him back up on the B tier ring. Like, he lost to Vettori, but I'll just accept the fact that he probably was genuinely injured. He said it was a foot injury, but he was still kicking Vettori out of his head the entire fight. So I don't know. He probably just didn't look very good in that fight. But stylistically, I was like, Costa is just he's a nightmare matchup for Morzakanov, and I was right. And we'll talk about the main event in a second, but who knows? A championship opportunity might be in Costa's future because Jiří Procházka versus Carlos Ulberg. My disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined. I picked Jiří by whatever he wants because I mentioned this. This is a nightmare. Even in my picks video, I mentioned this is a nightmare fight for Jiří Procházka. Carlos Ulberg just leg kicks at range, and he's got a left hook, and Jiří's kryptonite has been the left hook. And what's unfortunate about this fight is that Jiří could have won, you know, because Ulberg did hurt himself. He had like an ACL injury, but Jiří just wanted to fight honorably, didn't swarm him, didn't finish him, didn't just stay on the outside and leg kick him. He wanted to fight honorably with the Bushido code, when I don't think the Bushido code says anything about, hey, if your opponent hurts himself in a fight, you gotta let him back up and slice you open, right? I don't think it says anything like that. But I'm not gonna criticize Jiří. He went out on a shield. He did what Jiří would want to do, and that's the most important thing, I guess, right? And now we got Ulberg as champion. And I don't mind Ulberg. He's had 2 first-round knockouts in a row now. He's quite fun to watch. It's just he's so void of any charisma, like any charisma whatsoever. He has none. It felt like after the fight was done, I wasn't really mad at anything. Like, even though Yuri's like my favorite fighter, it was more like I was just sitting there going, "Oh, Olberg's champion," right? It was. I think that's how so many people feel. I don't think anybody dislikes Olberg, but you'll hardly meet anybody who calls him their favorite fighter, right? Like he's just a complete black hole of charisma, and Yuri's like the exact opposite, right? So, unfortunately, Yuri loses and gets slimed out. But Olberg's probably going to be out for a while because of that leg injury. So going back to Paulo Costa, the light heavyweight division's back into that. This division, man. Ever since Jones left, it feels like it's in this constant state of flux because with Alex Pereira, we finally got some stability, and now we're back to, well, the champion's injured, now what? Yuri's coming off a loss, he just got knocked out. Ankalaev's coming off a loss, Khalil Roundtree's coming off a loss. Paulo Costa and Dominic Reyes are like the two guys who got wins. Are we going to have to see Costa versus Reyes for the light heavyweight belt? Do you know how sickening that sounds? As much as I like both guys, Costa, and funny enough, Costa actually makes more sense than Dominic Reyes, because Reyes got slimed out by Olberg before that, whereas Costas at least got like a small winning streak, a measly 2-fight win streak. But he did go up. He did do a very impressive job against Azamat Morzakanov and knocked out a guy who was undefeated. So if they throw Costa in there against, I don't know, a Yuri, Ankalaev, a Roundtree, fun fights, but the light heavyweight division's kind of back in that same goofy position it was in after Jones left. So yeah, I got this one wrong. I was very disappointed. And yeah, I know what's next for Yuri. I mean, anytime he loses, he talks about going back down to middleweight, which I hate. Or not going back down, just going down to middleweight. And I'm like, dude, just stay at light heavyweight. This is your division. The narrative was that he would beat everybody at this division not named Alex Pereira, but unfortunately, that's not true. Carlos Olberg gets it done. And yeah, so that was UFC 327. I got that fight wrong, but I got Costa right. Just slammed the kicks. I was like, this is a stylistically bad fight for Azamat, and I was right. And I'll be honest, I've always known what Costa was good and bad at. I guess because I was always like, oh, he's not going to get hurt by Azamat like that. He's not going to get dropped. He's going to slam kicks. Yeah, I kept him in like a C tier fighter. That was my mistake. I'm boosting him up to B tier, I guess. He just had a bad night against Marvin Vettori, right? Hokit versus Blades versus Hokit. I picked Hokit. Against just a blobbier fighter, I thought that a guy light on his feet would be kind of the kryptonite for guys like this who don't have the heaviest hands, aren't the most athletic. Curtis Blades is probably the best of that type because he's kind of somewhere in the center between a blob and a very athletic heavyweight fighter. But even the Rizvan Kuniev fight, I did not see anything from Blades where I was like, oh, he beats he's like a top level, championship level heavyweight. I didn't think so. And Hokit's fast on his feet, and he could even go down to light heavyweight. He's not a big heavyweight by any means, and he's got heavy hands too, dude. Not many guys can do that to Curtis Blades. If you're not Tom Aspinall or Sergey Pavlovich or like a Derek Lewis, right? Like guys who we know have heavy hands. I picked Johnny Walker because I thought the leg kicks and just staying at range would work, and he's goofy, but I think that Dominic Reyes has a habit of just coming in with his chin in the air, but he got the split decision win. I picked Cub Swanson. Nothing he hasn't seen from Nate. Like, he's seen it all, and I don't think Nate brings anything that Cub hasn't seen, so I went with Cub. I picked Pico. Just, if you're not going to finish him, you're not going to beat him. If you're trying to take him to a decision, like a crafty vet, I think, funny enough, a crafty vet performance or style or technique is the worst thing you could do against a guy like Aaron Pico. Like, he's too explosive. He builds into fights. You got to finish him, right? So I went with Aaron Pico. I went with Kevin Holland. I just thought both guys have very similar styles. I just thought Kevin Holland does it a bit better. That was kind of my main reason for picking him. And Gamrot versus Esteban Rubovic, I went with Gamrot. I just think he's really good. And the I can't even remember his name again. Like, what is it, Lowen? That fight, I just thought, man, Gamrot might not hit as hard as him, but he's a better wrestler, and I think Gamrot's going to have a lot of success in the wrestling, and he did. So I got the two early prelims wrong of Godinez and Kelvin Gastelum, they both lost. And I didn't even talk about the Radtke and the Chris Padilla fight, which is insane. That one wouldn't even have counted because it was like a draw. So I'm not going to include that one. I was picking Radtke, but I didn't mention him in my predictions video, so I'm not going to count that as I mentioned. So yeah, those are my UFC 327 picks and reactions to my picks and to the overall card. It was a sick card. In general, kind of left on a sour note, but it was still a really fun card. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.